Hey, so over the last couple of weeks, we've been talking about pollution. We've talked so far about water pollution and about air pollution. And if you were absent for any of those days, you need to go back and review. I should have the notes on Google Classroom for you. If not today, then very soon. Remind me. But today we're going to start on a new section, which is waste and how to manage solid waste, where it comes from, and where it goes. So let's begin. Don't forget that I'll have the notes for you guys following the slides. So I'll show you the information and then I'll switch to a notes page and show you what to write down. All right, so first let's start off with what is solid waste. We've talked about air, we've talked about water. Now what's this solid stuff? Well, solid waste is any discarded solid material, anything that we don't want anymore, our trash, our garbage. Anything from used coffee grounds to old cars, we throw away when we're done with it. Every year, the United States generates more than 10 billion metric tons of garbage. About a third of that is recycled, but over half of it heads to landfills. Now, the amount of solid waste that Americans have produced has almost tripled since the 1960s. Imagine all that trash. So here's what I want you to start off with for waste section. We're going to talk about solid waste, which is discarded materials from coffee grounds to old cars, anything that we throw away. All this stuff has to go somewhere. And as our population increases and we start spreading out, needing new spaces for homes and roads and businesses, the land that's available for landfills for waste disposal decreases. It's becoming a lot harder to dispose of the waste that we create. So we've got to start getting creative. How are we going to reduce what we're throwing away? And how are we going to possibly change what happens to it after we throw it away? So one quick thing I want you to jot down is that more people equals less land to store the waste. So we got to be creative. We got to think of something else to do. Now, not all waste is created equal. Some waste can be broken down through time. That's called biodegradable. Biodegradable waste are things like paper, cotton, things that are natural fibers or have natural sources, wood. We have organisms that can naturally break down those materials and recycle them back into the nutrient cycle, back into soil, back into the air. There are, however, a bunch of substances that we've created that are not biodegradable. They can't be broken down. Our organisms that we have on Earth right now have not evolved to break those things down because they're created, they're synthetic materials. So we're talking things like plastics, polyester, things that are artificially created by people that don't have organisms that are structured to break them down. So I made myself a little column of things that are biodegradable that can be broken down, things that are non-biodegradable that can't be broken down, and then a couple of examples of each. So we mentioned plastics. Plastics are very varied, very varied. There's lots of different types of plastics depending on how those hydrocarbons are structured. So anything from the clear light plastic of your water bottle to the very thick, heavy plastic of your cell phone case. Lots of different types of plastics, but they all come from petroleum. And since they come from petroleum, there aren't a lot of organisms that have evolved to break down those complex hydrocarbons. So to break down plastic, it could take hundreds or even thousands of years. In the meantime, what we refer to as breaking down could be that they just turn into smaller and smaller pieces, and then they are washed into a river or a lake or an ocean, and they're ingested by animals. So plastics are kind of a nasty thing. We got to really start thinking about what we're going to do with all this plastic that we have. So I've written down plastics. They are created from petroleum. The organisms cannot break down those complex hydrocarbon molecules, so it may take thousands of years to get rid of. All right, so types of solid waste. One type that you and I know very well is what's called municipal solid waste. Now, even though we think of our homes and our businesses as being a very big deal, really our municipal solid waste is only about 2% of the total solid waste that's produced. And this is produced by our houses, our businesses, the bakery down the street, the hospital, the library, the school. These are places that you and I go. The good news is that the waste that's generated by our municipal system may be slowing down. We're looking at better ways of reducing what we use to begin with, and then recycling those things once we get finished with them. So you see in our pie chart over here, a lot of the things that are thrown away, you see 37% is food waste, 24% is plastics. We're getting better about recycling plastics. 25% is paper. That's definitely recyclable. So there's more that we can do and that we should do to reduce this amount of stuff that is disposed of every year. So I wrote on here municipal solid waste. Municipal is kind of a synonym for city. So city solid waste. Those are our households and businesses, and that's about 2% of the total solid waste. The rest of it is industrial. It comes from manufacturing, it comes from mining, it comes from agriculture. This is stuff that's discarded from our factories and our mines and our farms. So that can be anything from scrap metal, plastics, paper, sludge out of power plants, ash. Any of that stuff is considered industrial waste. Now for mining, that includes rock and minerals left over from excavation and processing. So think about all the rocks and minerals that you've had to remove to dig down and get gold or coal or copper. It's a lot of wasted solids right there that you have to figure out how to dispose of it. So I wrote down industrial solid waste. That's from manufacturing, from mining, from agriculture. It can include scrap metal, sludge, ash, and excavated rocks. So if you can't see the bottom of this, it's going to show up on the next one in just a second. So I'm not sure where the line is. So how do we manage this? Once we throw it away, what happens to it then? Well, over half of our solid waste goes to landfills. And a landfill is a permanent waste disposal facility where they bury it. They put it in the ground and they cover it with a layer of soil or plastic, or a lot of times both together. They have to contain that waste so it doesn't leak toxins into the groundwater. But there it sits. A landfill is just a garbage dump, and there it is. So there's that industrial solid waste, if you didn't get it last time. Let me move myself down. For manufacturing, mining, agriculture, there's scrap metal, sludge, ash, and excavated rock. Now I've added in my little pie chart here. Over half is landfills, sent to the landfills. A third is recycled, and then that remaining 15% is incinerated, or what we call burned. Now, landfills, I put on here my definition. It's a permanent waste disposal facility where it's basically buried. Now, there are some problems with landfills. Landfills seem like a great way to get it out, out of our way, but there are some problems. One is leachate. Leachate is a liquid that forms when water trickles down through a landfill and along the way absorbs a lot of those chemicals from the decomposing garbage. Now, to combat this, your landfills usually have some kind of a monitoring well to monitor that leachate that's coming through. And sometimes they'll even have storage tanks to collect that leachate and then treat it like it's wastewater. You also, on the other side, instead of leaching down, you have methane gas that percolates up. It's produced by your decomposing organic waste. And that methane gas can be pumped out and used as fuel, or it can be just vented off into the atmosphere. So here I've added our problems right under landfill. The problems are the leachate, the water that seeps through the garbage and collects chemicals, and the methane gas, which is produced from those decomposing organic wastes. So to keep landfills from being a bigger problem than they are, our new landfills, our new construction, has to have certain safeguards in order to be constructed. They have to be lined with clay and plastic, and that keeps that leachate out of the groundwater and out of the soil. They have to have a collection and treatment system for the leachate. They have to get rid of it somehow. And you have to have vent pipes to get that methane out and either just release it into the atmosphere or burn it. If you don't vent it out, then if you have that methane sitting there collecting underground, you could have an explosion hazard. So they have to vent it out to the atmosphere or burn it. Now, part of the cost of landfills has to take into account the public relations cost of building a landfill in a city. A lot of communities, a lot of homeowners have this philosophy, what we call NIMBY. NIMBY stands for not in my backyard. Yeah, we realize landfills are important, but it's not going in my neighborhood. So to construct a landfill, you have to think not only the cost of the landfill, but also the cost of possible legal fees or transportation costs to get the garbage away from the city so it's not next to someone with an objection. So I added in here, our new landfills must be lined with clay and plastic. They must collect and treat the leachate, and they must vent the methane so that it can be burned or vented to the atmosphere. But most often they burn it. Part of the cost of building a landfill is legal fees. And everyone has this philosophy of NIMBY, not in my backyard. So 55% landfills, 30% recycled. Incinerators make up that last 15%. Incinerators, it will reduce the volume of solid waste by burning it. And when you do that, it's good in that you've reduced the volume of your waste. You don't have as much to dispose of anymore. But they can also be bad, because when you're taking garbage into burn, they don't usually separate out what's okay to burn from what shouldn't be burned. And so when they burn everything, sometimes poisonous gases can be released, and the toxins can enter the air and possibly enter the water system. Also, once you finish burning it, you still have ash remaining, and that ash has to be disposed of somewhere too. Often, that disposal is a landfill. So I added on here incinerators. They burn solid waste. It's good in that you're reducing that volume down to just ashes, but it could be bad in that as you're burning that solid waste, it emits pollution into the atmosphere. So that's where we're going to stop today. We're going to stop today, and tomorrow when I return, we will discuss the second part of solid waste. Don't forget there is a quiz to go along with this that's linked directly under this video. And if you have any questions or need anything, you can put it on Classroom and I'll respond to you as soon as I can. Hope you'll have an awesome day, and I'll see you tomorrow.